So that's at the Tuatara. Really good food, really good art. We're playing there on Wednesday. I think it might actually be a good night. I'm a bit nervous, and I'll be honest, like, we'll be getting okay numbers, but it's sort of you watch the rugby and 120 people turn up to the pub at Riverton. Riverton, to be honest, wasn't one of the better nights, but we got 3. And it's like this whole thing of Norwell where you see people going entertained by bread and circuses, and they'll believe the most mundane, and the things that actually might challenge them or push their bones, they're actually being encouraged to look the other way. And this misinformation and disinformation, it chills my bones. It chills my bones that we're at a point in the statement where governments can get away with that shit and no one drags them up. You want people not to believe in fake news. Start running news services that start educating people on good quality information. Does the story have multiple sources? Does the story, multiple sources, come from independently different bursts of people? Or are they all, when you look at it, basically paid for by the same people? In which case, it's not news, it's propaganda. And yet, that's kind of the area which we're getting into, this one source of truth. And again, we get this whole thing about the misinformation and disinformation. So it started with COVID. Oh, it's such a tourist thing. We can't have people risk lives. Oh, we've got to stop misinformation. Okay, cool. Now you're doing it for the war in the Ukraine. You know what, again, proper fucking gander. And we have been through this shit with World War I. We've been through this shit with World War II. We've been through this shit with Vietnam, Borneo, Mayo, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. At what point does a human race just go the fuck up just a little bit and start to realise when they've been fucking spun a lie? And again, there's this acceptance of all of these methodologies where they actually spin doctors and marketing people come in to massage things. You have to call people like that. It's normally because you're trying to push forward a lie. Same thing with our look at the issue of democracy. And a lot of things that have been put forward to us on the surface sound quite decent. But once you start breaking them apart, what you're seeing is a consistent pattern of failure to due process, which again, that means that you're not being acting in a democratic way. So, to list a few examples. The 1986 Constitutional Act was defined by Justice Cook as a legal fiction. It wasn't passed through with the majority of the House. It wasn't passed through with a referendum. Helen Clark just did it, just like she did with the retrospective laws, which again, I'm pretty sure are freaking constitutionally not fucking cricket. Yet she's done it, no one's pulled her up on it, and then everybody else has come along and done the same thing. And of course, once you turn around and you start looking at the top of the legal chain and who defines these things, well, it's the Privy Council. Oh, look, we got a Privy Council there. Oh, look, it's Helen fucking Clark, and it's Winston fucking Peters, and it's Jenny fucking Shipley, and it's oh my God, what a cozy little world it is at the top there. That doesn't look democratical. That's this fundamental ignorance of the conflicts of interests, which basically came about when we stopped teaching civics in school, which again was done quite freaking deliberately and part of this little slowly brick by brick, just another brick in the wall. 1986 Constitutional Act, 2004 Supreme Court Act, which again many Pamari said, no, wait. We didn't sign a treaty with the Privy Council or Buckingham Palace. We signed it with Westminster. So if you want to pull this actually out, you've got to do it after you've done the constitutionalism, not before. Which again, because we're ignorant of constitutional matters, we just go along with it. On with the show, goofy and the ignorant. And again, when it was put for the Supreme Court, which is a constitutional part of our structure, which again we should know, this is not even particularly deep stuff. But no referendum, no majority parliament, just push through because they're allowed to do it. Then you get to Constitutional Advisory Panel. It makes no mention of the whānau or the hapu. It makes no mention of any of the statutes. In other words, it makes no mention of any of the things that make a democracy a democracy. So how can you have a Constitutional Advisory Panel which is just basically talking about carving up, and even again, from the Maori representation, I think there was one person not outside Ngātahu, and the rest of the Maori representation was Ngātahu. How does that represent all of Maoridom? No, it fucking doesn't. But again, we are bereft of a media that is actually willing to critique it, and then they sit there wondering why people don't actually have any faith in them anymore. And I tell you what, I was at Wellington, I saw with my own eyes, and I worked with the media for 30 years, how they covered that story. It was a fucking national disgrace, and they need to fucking own that. And it doesn't matter what your view is on mandates or vaccines, there is an acceptable way to cover a story, but except for journalists don't do that anymore. And that's true both of the left and right. The majority of working journalists out there are pushing a fucking agenda, and we the public have let that be acceptable. You know, journalism isn't about taking a side, it's about following the facts to where they lead you to, and having the balls to fucking speak out. So, you know, again, with the Constitutional Advisory Panel, once it was done in a very hokey Edmonton way, as was the flag debate, which was, again, had people from the Constitutional Advisory Panel sitting on it. So again, conflict of interest much? No, you know, the whole process has been a complete sham. And again, with the Murray Awards, I mean, they could have actually been a really, really good thing and probably overdue for the time. But the government pushed them through, and even when the government's own advisor said, look, you're doing this in a hasty way, and it's kind of come back and bite you in the arse. So now we actually have, as a representation of that particular rush-through policy, is turning around and saying, okay, well, actually, all of Te Mari must be consulted on all matters, and this was pushed through Justin Deneen 14-1 because there wasn't a 2 days consultation period, there wasn't a 2 days discussion period, it was just rushed through. And nobody stopped to think, hey, wait a minute, you know what? Good laws take time to actually implement, because you need to have those discussions to make sure they are fair and valid. And not just because, I don't like Te Mari, it's because actually it's as much for protection of the Murray population as well, so that their culture doesn't get used or abused as it has been used by corporate iwi leaders who are in bed with far and fucking off corporations, and we all think that's, you know, we all know that's Murray business, we don't get to discuss that. Well, it's not, it's New Zealand fucking business, and everybody gets to discuss it, should be able to discuss, and it should all be done in an open, transparent way. But I said it's the gaslighting, and that's what really offends me. It's the gaslighting of good causes. First Nation Indigenous co-governance is a very good cause, but when it's been hijacked so that it's only actually protecting a few elite, and it's done consistently done in a pattern where there is no due process and the rules are not followed, then you know what? There is something rotten in the state of Denmark. And we, as Māori and Pākehā alike, and that includes even first-generation people that come to New Zealand and now that this is their home country as well, we're no longer a bilingual country, we're a multilingual country and a multicultural country, and that's all cool. As long as the democracy is actually a democracy, and it's not just being pushed forward in the advance of a few fucking elites, which is where it's at now, and we need to start owning that. Anyway, come and hear me rant more on Wednesday night. I'll assure you if you're left wing, I'll offend you. I'll assure you if you're right wing, I'll offend you. I saw recently in the newspaper and the Media Watch going, sometimes if you offend both the left and right, it's just because your viewpoints are just so unoffendable. I mean, when does a media actually start thinking that is actually, going, oh, well, wait a minute, so that means you say, well, that's the favourite defence of the editor and journalist, but when we do it, it's journalism. Someone else does it, oh no. So again, this whole narcissistic fucking, that's what it is. It's a culture of narcissism. It's a culture of narcissism, of gaslighting that's been allowed to perpetuate and actually seep into the bones of our societal fabric. And it's, we should all be fucking scared shitless. By the end of this, a lot of people are going to get killed if it carries on like this. And anyway, come and see my show. Whether you're left wing, whether you're right wing, whatever your sacred ox, you can be damn sure that I will offend you, but you can also be damn sure that at the end of the day, really what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the restoration of balance for everybody, and looking at this process of due process that's been subverted along the way, and making people aware that we need to start having an open and honest and frank discussion about the state of a democracy in New Zealand, because it's not very bloody healthy at the moment, regardless of what the PR spin doctors will tell you.